I love science and I love research, because if you have a question, like, you have the tools to answer it.
Grad school is not about knowing facts. It is about asking questions, figuring out the best ways to answer them.
The excitement of doing science is discovering the things that will eventually be in books. It's a big transition. It's a big difference, and the rules are not written down. And the rules of graduate school can vary not only between different disciplines, but the rules or culture in graduate school can differ from lab to lab.
Being able to pull from the experiences of other people, older students or faculty or other people that work in an institution are going to help you to contextualize how you might be feeling or what your experiences are going to be. At the undergraduate level, and even everything up until then, you're mostly regurgitating information that you've been taught, not as much grappling with it and synthesizing new things.
You have to be much more proactive. You have to be thinking much more intentionally about what directions you want to do in terms of your coursework. There's a lot more autonomy, but along with that autonomy, there's a lot of increased responsibility.
I was delighted when when I started graduate school, that nobody ever seemed to care if I showed up in the lab. And if it was a nice day, the beach was very close by. And then after a couple of months of that, and there wasn't a lot of progress on my research, I started to understand, oh, I guess that's up to me.
One piece of advice that students often get is that they really need to make their research their own. But what does that even mean? When I think of owning your research, I think of making decisions about it. What questions to ask, how to go about answering them, what methods to use, how to go about using them, what data to collect, how to go about collecting it, all of the decisions that need to be made.
But there are no guidelines as to exactly what that should look like. And often nobody will tell you what's enough, what's not enough. A lot is left to students to figure out on their own.
The steps to get from the beginning to the end are not always clear.
If you want to do research, you need someone to guide you. And that means you need some kind of advisor that hopefully plays a mentorship role for you.
You choose a principal investigator who is the head of a laboratory who will lead the questions that you're beginning to answer.
You depend on a thesis advisor for not just mentorship, but also guidance, input in research, and opportunities to advance your career.
Hopefully there are some milestones that your grad school and your graduate program has put in place, in terms of quals and preparing your proposal and so forth. And hopefully that gives you some sense, are you progressing in the right direction? But it's less concrete, right? You don't get a course grade like you're getting an A or a B, and because you're doing research, you're at the frontiers of knowledge. So that feedback becomes much more nebulous and much less frequent. So you have to be much more proactive of asking for feedback and doing something constructive with that feedback.
Who you know and how you get from A to B also plays a huge role in being able to be successful.
Cultural capital is the sort of how you know. How do scientists ask questions? How do scientists go about their work? How does research get done? And if you have that knowledge, you are more likely to be accepted as part of that community.
So many of the standards and norms we use in science about how we behave and how we expect people to show up reflect a very narrow slice of the full expression of human culture.
So much of how we work is dependent on your ability to have the social and the cultural capital that you need to make the necessary connections in order to get the resources and information that you need, in addition to your talent and your skill.
Those unspoken things can actually help make a difference, can make a substantial difference between whether a student stays in science or not, and whether a student ends up in a research career or not, whether they have access to that information that might otherwise be unspoken.
There are lots of situations where students from historically marginalized groups might fall through these cracks.
Mentors are extremely helpful in, say, helping students interpret this experience.
In science, you gotta have the lowest lows, and then you get the highest highs that you could ever feel. Like, I synthesized this molecule. I have 100% of this molecule in the world. You made something that no one else, to your knowledge, through the literature, has ever made. That's crazy, right? Like, that to me is awesome.
If you have that sense of curiosity, that sense that you really just want to understand fundamentally what's going on, I think that is what connects us all as scientists.